They ask him whatever they want, right? And nothing he says can be held against him in that proffer. Nothing. And this is what they call a snitch session.
YNW Borland just unleashed details so explosive they could lock his former best friend Melly away forever. And the whole scene feels like the ground just cracked open under the hip-hop world. After 6 long years of riding with him, Borland finally broke and took that plea deal, and what he confessed about that deadly night flipped the story upside down. This revelation didn't just shake the case.
And also by the nature of the pleas that he's taken, accessory after the fact of murder, it helps the state. Why the fuck would the state drop 5 life sentences to just be like, oh, we just want this guy to go home? Come on.
It shattered everything people thought they knew about YNW Melly. This is real street-level pressure, the kind that makes even the boldest crews start whispering. September 9th, 2025 is already being talked about like a landmark moment, because that's the day YNW Borland made one of the most controversial moves the rap world has seen in years. A move that might lock in Melly's fate forever.
A proffer is usually a session between the defendant and the U.S. attorneys or the district attorneys in this case. And what usually happens is that they call it, and this is the popular name for it, Queen for a Day. Usually a part of your plea deal, they want you, plea deals are different, but in a proffer session, they're going to allow you to tell them everything.
We're talking about a plea deal so wild, so heavy, that the whole scene is buzzing about what really happens when keeping it real turns into a nightmare. Here's the part that's got everybody heated. YNW Borland stepped into that courtroom and accepted a plea deal just 1 day before his murder trial was supposed to kick off. He sidestepped 2 first-degree murder charges that could have buried him so deep he'd only see his great-grandkids through a prison screen. But this wasn't just about saving himself. This move could crush YNW Melly's chances of ever touching freedom again, and people are calling it the coldest betrayal they've seen in a minute. Legal experts say it's smart. The streets say it's foul. But everyone agrees on one thing. Borland just changed the whole playing field, and Melly's defense team is probably losing sleep right now. Here's how it all went down in that Broward County courtroom.
They ask him whatever they want, right? And nothing he says can be held against him in that proffer. Nothing. And this is what they call a snitch session. He's taken a deal where he's getting, 10 years in, 6 years on probation. He's already got 7 in.
Cortland Henry, Borland's government name, walked into that courthouse facing charges heavy enough to sink anyone. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of accessory after the fact, witness tampering in a capital case, directing criminal gang activity, conspiracy to commit tampering, and unlawful use of a 2-way communication device. In street terms, that's what people call straight football numbers. The kind of sentence where your whole family grows old before you even smell freedom again.
You take a plea, you saying we did it. Even though you're saying no contest, you snitching.
Even if he doesn't have to testify, make a statement, that's still snitching.
But instead of rolling the dice in front of a jury, Borland hit the system with a no-contest plea. He pled to witness tampering, 2 accessory counts tied to a capital felony, and that unlawful communication charge. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to drop those murder charges, the same ones that could have had him stuck behind bars forever. That plea landed him 10 years in prison plus 6 years of probation. And here's the twist that made everyone sit up. He's getting credit for the time he's already served since his 2019 arrest. Borland is now staring at a potential release date of January 6, 2032, which means he could be back outside in less than 7 years instead of growing old in a Florida pen.
That's what the system do, man. They set them boys in there, them boys been in there since what? Valentine's Day 2019, 2018 or something like that. Went to trial, you know what I'm saying, hung jury or whatever they had going on. Really, in reality, hung jury or whatever, they couldn't come up with a decision. Shorty them had some leeway.
In simple street math, that's the difference between living a life and becoming another forgotten statistic. But here's the part that has the whole culture arguing like never before. As part of this deal, Borland has to sit down for what's known as a proffer, basically a full breakdown of everything he knows about the case. His legal team keeps insisting there's no requirement for him to turn anything on Melly, but people who truly know how the system moves aren't buying that for a second. Come on, the streets know better. This is where things turn heavy and why this plea deal is being described as a possible knockout punch to Melly's defense.
State, is that the complete term? That's it?
He's also going to be giving his proffer, Your Honor,
Proffer.
at a later time.
Is that part of the negotiated resolution?
It is.
Part of the negotiated resolution, you got to give a proffer.
For over 6 years, the prosecution has built their story around the idea that Melly and Borland plotted together to end the lives of their crew members, Christopher YNW Juvie Thomas Jr. and Anthony YNW Sackchaser Williams back in October 2018. According to the state, Melly was the one who fired the shots inside the Jeep while Borland was behind the wheel. And after that, the two supposedly teamed up to stage the whole thing like a drive-by. They're saying the pair rode around with the bodies before heading to the hospital. Now, with Borland's plea, which basically accepts that he played some role after the fact, the prosecution just gained something they never had before, a move that strengthens their entire premeditated murder theory. This situation is no longer lining up with the story Borland first told police when he rushed into the hospital with 2 bodies and claimed it was a random hit on the street. And the timing? Wildly calculated. Borland took this deal exactly 1 day before jury selection for his trial was supposed to start. That's not panic. That's someone who studied the board, saw every piece falling apart, and realized his choices were down to terrible, or worse. But here's where things go nuclear for Melly's case. Borland's attorney keeps saying that the no contest plea isn't an admission of guilt. But anyone who's ever watched how these courtrooms work knows that when you're facing life sentences and you agree to a deal that forces you to give detailed info, nobody on the streets cares about what the legal labels are. They look at the action, not the wording. People online are already calling this a Gunna-style plea, comparing it to Sergio Kitchen's controversial deal in the YSL case, one that saved him from prison but had the culture questioning his credibility. Moves like this keep you physically free but can stain your name forever. To really understand what's happening here, you gotta look at where all this started. The YNW crew came up in Gifford, Florida. Kids who grew up together, shared the same dreams, the same struggles, the same goal of escaping poverty through music. Jamel Demons, YNW Melly, Christopher Thomas Jr., YNW Juvie, Anthony Williams, YNW Sackchaser, and Cortland Henry, YNW Bortland, weren't just collaborators. They were childhood friends building something as a family. Everything flipped on October 26, 2018. That night, the crew left a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale, and prosecutors say what should have been a simple night of making music ended in a tragedy that left 2 young men dead and their closest friends facing capital charges that could bring the death penalty. But Borland's plea deal doesn't just shake his own situation, it cuts straight into one of Melly's biggest defense angles. From the jump, Melly's legal team has argued he had nothing to do with the murders and that the state's theory was totally backwards. Part of their strategy involved being able to point toward other possible suspects, including Borland. Now that Borland has officially acknowledged his role as an accessory after the fact, that whole defense strategy Melly's team was hoping to use has been wiped out completely. Prosecutors can now point straight at his plea and say, "See, this lines up with our entire story." That gives them something they've been missing for years: corroboration from someone who was actually there during what they claim went down. This is the type of boost a case like this usually never gets. And the streets, the reaction was explosive. The second news of Borland's plea hit social media, the hip-hop world snapped into a full-on frenzy. Debates, accusations, heartbreak, disappointment. Every timeline turned into a battleground over what loyalty really means when you're staring at multiple life sentences. The reaction wasn't soft at all. It was harsh, raw, and exactly what happens when someone is seen as breaking the culture's unspoken rules. Within hours, Borland's name was trending everywhere. People were connecting his situation to every other high-profile moment where artists took deals instead of standing firm. Gonna Plea started flooding the internet, with fans comparing Borland to Sergio Kitchen's controversial YSL deal that left the culture split and questioning what keeping it real even means in 2025. But the most powerful reactions came from the families who have waited over 6 years for answers. Anthony Morton, speaking for the Thomas family, said they were satisfied with the deal, explaining, "At the end of the day, Mr. Henry knows what happened. He was in the car, but he wasn't the shooter." For these families, any step toward truth, anything that moves this case forward, is progress after years of emotional exhaustion. But out in the streets and across hip-hop culture, the vibe was completely different. Being labeled a snitch isn't just losing respect, it's social death. It can crush your career, shut down partnerships, and even put your safety at risk. Once that label sticks, it follows you everywhere, from your neighborhood all the way into the music industry. Things heated up even more when people started digging into the details of Borland's plea. The biggest issue wasn't even the deal itself. It was the proffer requirement that had everyone sounding alarms. In plain street talk, a proffer is like a sit-down where you spill everything you know. You sit in a room with prosecutors and break down the whole story from start to finish. A tell-them-everything conversation. And the psychological weight of that setup? Heavy. The justice system is built to apply pressure, real pressure, putting people in positions where they feel torn between loyalty to their circle and loyalty to their own survival. Borland has been locked up since 2019, over 6 years gone while he sat in county jail missing birthdays, funerals, family moments, all the things regular people take for granted. But the streets don't care about mental pressure or the reality of being locked up that long. They cared about one question and one question only. Is Borland a snitch, or is he just a young man doing what he felt he had to do to survive an impossible situation? And of course, the comparison started flying instantly. People brought up Tekashi 6ix9ine, who fully cooperated and testified in federal court against his former crew. They brought up Gunna's YSL plea, which many still see as cooperation even though he never took the stand. They even reached back to older rap cases where artists chose freedom over loyalty, building a timeline that made Borland's move look like the latest chapter in a growing trend. What made Borland's situation even more complicated was how his team tried to take control before things spiraled further. Reports dropped saying Borland addressed the rumors in a freestyle he posted online, denying that he took any deal that would hurt his people and trying to defend his name through music. He reportedly stated in a freestyle, "What I look like taking a deal that hurt my free me and me." But even with that attempt to clear his name, the court of public opinion had already made its decision. In hip-hop culture, once the perception hits the streets, it becomes reality way faster than the truth ever can. And the perception was loud. Borland chose self-preservation over loyalty to his day one friend. The cultural impact goes way beyond just these two men. This whole situation represents a pattern we've been seeing more and more with young black artists coming out of tough neighborhoods. From RICO cases to gang indictments, the entire system feels set up to push people into cooperation, even when it clashes with the street principles they were raised around. The debate got even deeper as people started speculating about what Borland's proffer might actually include. Even though the exact details haven't been released, people familiar with the case are saying his statement likely breaks down everything that happened on October 26, 2018, the night Christopher Thomas Jr. and Anthony Williams lost their lives. If that's true, this info could smash whatever defense Melly's team has been building for 6 years. And with the timing lining up right before Melly's upcoming retrial, the stakes couldn't be higher. Melly's retrial has already been postponed a bunch of times and is now set for January 2027. That gives the prosecution years to take whatever they get from Borland's proffer and lock it into their strategy. This isn't some small twist. It completely shifts the landscape of the case. And the personal betrayal? That's the part that cuts the deepest. These weren't just co-defendants thrown together by coincidence. Melly and Borland were real friends, kids who came up in the same streets, built their dreams together, and pushed each other toward success. The YNW Collective wasn't just a rap crew. It was a brotherhood born out of survival in Gifford, Florida. Young men with limited options who turned music into their escape route. They shared everything: wins, losses, studio nights, shows, and all the moments that come with trying to climb out of poverty. Now that Bond is cracked beyond repair, shattered by legal pressure and life-changing decisions. The cultural debate blowing up around this case shows a bigger tension inside hip-hop. On one side, you've got the purists who say the street code is sacred and should never be broken, no matter the cost. On the other side, you've got people who understand the system is built to trap you into impossible choices, and sometimes survival forces your hand. And now, the big question everyone has been scared to say out loud: is it game over for Melly? As the dust settles and the legal fallout becomes clearer, the picture is looking brutal. Borland's plea deal might have just sealed the direction of Melly's entire future, and not in a good way. This isn't just one man trying to save himself. It's a strategic shift that could reshape one of the most high-profile murder cases hip-hop has ever seen. The ripple effects might hit the culture for years. Legally, Borland's plea is a disaster for Melly's defense. By pleading no contest to accessory after the fact, he basically gave the prosecution what they've been fighting to prove since day one: validation that their whole theory holds weight. Legal experts are calling this a nightmare scenario for Melly's defense because it destroys one of their biggest arguments and hands the state exactly what they needed to push harder than ever. Here's why this changes everything for Melly's legal situation. From the beginning, Melly's lawyers have stood firm, saying he had nothing to do with the deaths of Christopher Thomas Jr. and Anthony Williams. They've insisted that the drive-by theory the prosecution pushed was built on shaky evidence and flawed assumptions. But now, with Borland stepping into this role through his plea, the state suddenly has a piece they were missing, a piece that could give their entire case a new level of credibility. Part of Melly's defense strategy always involved the possibility of pointing to other suspects, including Borland himself. But now that option is completely gone. With Borland taking a deal that acknowledges he played a role as an accessory after the fact, that entire angle has been blown apart. The prosecution can now hold up Borland's plea as something close to concrete proof that their version of the story is the real one, that this wasn't some random street situation, but a planned setup followed by a calculated cover-up. But the most dangerous piece of this whole deal for Melly's future is the proffer requirement. Borland's attorney keeps claiming that whatever he says in that proffer can't be used directly against Melly. But anyone who truly understands how the system works knows that's only part of the truth. Proffer info is like a blueprint for prosecutors. It gives them direction, strategy, and insight even if the exact words never hit the courtroom floor. Whatever Borland reveals behind those closed doors can guide investigators toward new witnesses, fresh evidence, or better questions for the people already on the stand. It can even shape how the prosecution prepares to challenge Melly's testimony if he decides to take the stand at all. And beyond the legal angles, there's the psychological punch. Imagine knowing your former best friend, the same person you grew up with, toured with, shared dreams with, has now sat down with the same prosecutors trying to put you away for life. You can't measure that kind of impact. Reports say Melly asked for new lawyers right after Borland took the deal, which shows just how deeply this shook his whole legal strategy and his confidence in the fight ahead. Then there's Borland's physical transformation, which hit the internet hard. When he was moved to South Florida Reception Center to start his sentence, he had his dreadlocks cut off and his head shaved clean. It's standard procedure in some facilities, but the symbolism was impossible to ignore. The person who once stood next to Melly as part of the YNW Brotherhood now looks and legally stands like a completely different man. A chapter has closed and another one opened, but this one is darker, colder, and way more complicated, and the impact stretches way beyond this case. The bigger picture is even more troubling. Once again, the hip-hop world is seeing a familiar and painful pattern. Young black artists from struggling neighborhoods getting pulled into a system that feels designed to break them down or box them in. They face choices no one should have to make. Cooperate, get buried by the system, or get erased entirely. None of those options lead to real freedom. This situation shows how the cycle keeps repeating: pressure, betrayal, incarceration, elimination. The story goes deeper than Melly and Borland. It's a reflection of how the system treats young men from communities already fighting uphill battles every day, and in this case, the consequences are unfolding in front of the entire world. This case also sparked a huge debate about the controversial practice of using rap lyrics in court, something that hits hip-hop culture right in the heart. Prosecutors have pushed to introduce lyrics from more than 55 of Melly's songs, plus album art and music videos trying to use them as proof of motive, gang ties, or even confession-like intent. His breakout track, Murder on My Mind, which was recorded before the murders even happened, has been picked apart for every violent line, even though countless artists use storytelling and fiction in their music. By mid-2025, Melly had spent over 2,300 days behind bars with no conviction. And the cost of his legal battle, mixed with all the money he's missed out on from not touring, recording, or promoting his catalog, adds up to millions in lost opportunities. Meanwhile, the families of the victims are still fighting for closure after more than 6 years of pain. Christopher Thomas Sr., the father of YNW Juvie, has said publicly that he believes a financial dispute helped spark the tragedy. According to him, the crew was negotiating a deal to sell the YNW brand. Sack Chaser was supposed to get $200,000 and Juvie $100,000, but arguments broke out between Sack Chaser and Melly over who controlled the money and how it should be split. That tension, he claims, may have played a major role in everything that spiraled out of control that night. And the psychological toll? It's massive. Melly has spent more than 6 years locked up during the prime years of his career. Years he'll never get back. His mother has blasted his former legal team for weak communication and bad representation, while the endless delays and legal twists have kept the entire situation stuck in limbo. Nobody involved, families, friends, or the artists themselves, has escaped the emotional weight of this case, so now the world is left asking the same burning questions. Is Melly a talented young artist who got swept into chaos he couldn't control? Or is he someone who must be held fully responsible for what prosecutors say he did? There's no easy answer, and emotions on every side run deep. But one thing is undeniable. YNW Borland's plea deal flipped the entire situation on its head, and the effects will echo through the hip-hop community for years to come. Whether justice is ultimately served, for the victims, for Melly, for Borland, and for every family touched by this heartbreaking tragedy, remains unclear until this long, exhausting legal saga finally reaches its last chapter. The story of YNW Melly and YNW Borland stands as a powerful cautionary tale about fame, loyalty, friendship, and the brutal reality of what happens when all those things collide with the unforgiving world of the criminal justice system. As we wait for whatever comes next, one truth remains impossible to deny. This case has changed the culture forever, and it's far from over. So let me know what you think. Drop a comment, hit like, share this with someone following the case, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates.